Hey, I am so glad you have joined us for the Play Skillfully podcast. I am a little bit excited about today's guest. I might just squeal. You guys, this lady, I have followed her work for years. I am such a fan, and I cannot wait for us to talk about all the things. So, Julie is the graduated homeschooling mom to five, which I love. She's the founder of The Brave Writer and has helped thousands of families like fall in love with writing, which is so dear to my heart. She has written one of my favorite books, The Brave Learner. I have it here somewhere. I was just looking through it again.
Oh,
She has
amazing.
written, we'll talk about that. Also, Raising Critical Thinkers and the new book, Help. My kid hates writing. Julie Bogart.
Thank you. My gosh, I'm so eager to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I am so excited. Our philosophies align so well. Your passion for curiosity, for enchantment of learning, just is so what I preach about. And I love everything you say. I might be your biggest fan. I think I'm realizing, Julie, I'm your biggest fan. Hey, let's start with the Brave Learners. This year, I took my curriculum guide, A Year of Playing Skillfully, and I gave it an edit. And one of the things I did is I asked my social media base, hey, tell me the book that's impacted you the most. Like, and over again,
Wow.
people just kept saying The Brave Learner. And I'm going to be honest, I had not read it because, listen, like you, I've
Yes,
graduated a million
right,
kids. I'm on
right.
the other side, but I ordered it immediately. I read it cover to cover because I wanted to know why people loved it so much. Girl, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you say in it. I love how you say that learning should be this enchanting environment, more about curiosity than curriculum. Unpack that a little bit for us.
A number of years ago, you'll probably remember this. There was a live streaming app called Periscope that had just come out. It was before Facebook Live. It really was the genesis of these live streaming video oriented apps. And a friend told me to hop on. And the very first Periscope that I did, I called the Enchanted Education, and I put forward the idea that there were four forces of enchantment that created the experience of learning. They were surprise, mystery, risk, and adventure. And I unpacked each one a little bit and showed that what we're really aiming for is this engagement of a child. That when we're thinking, get the information in and make sure they retain it, we're actually missing the spirit of what these children beings are like. They are
Yes.
most drawn to surprises, not knowing what's coming next. They love mysteries to untangle. They are motivated by risk because their little bodies and minds and hearts have the capacity to tolerate risk. And then they love adventures. And so I gave this 1 hour conversation going through each of those. And then at the end, I gave them this very big send off, almost like a cheerleading send off. And that video went wild. It for me, it was my first experience really of going viral, and it became the foundation for writing that book. I suddenly saw that the things I was sort of taking for granted in the way I saw education had not been sort of re upped for the new generation.
Mm-hmm.
My
Yes.
roots are certainly with people like John Holt and John Taylor Gatto, and I love Charlotte Mason and I loved Maria Montessori. There was this immersive experiential orientation to learning that formed the basis of how I taught. But it was in partnering with a very close friend named Dottie, whose background was in preschool, that I started to understand the magic of learning. And
Yes.
I felt like parents needed handholds that weren't just telling them, unschool, do nothing, stay away from curriculum. They needed to actually understand what they were catalyzing,
Yes.
how they were guiding their children into that immersive experience.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly how I wrote my book, The Homegrown Preschooler, and why. Because I was a child development specialist, had worked in the field of early childhood for a million years, but as a homeschool mom, thought no one's teaching
Yeah.
this play based, what you said, magical, experiential learning to our young moms. No, we're skipping over that. We just are starting with worksheets and we're missing this whole beautiful way of discovering learning. And so I love that. I love that we both were having that,
Yes.
epiphany at the same time of, okay, let's get it out there because, listen, we're not the young moms anymore. We're kind of
No.
those older ladies, which is cracking me up. And so now I just want to first, I wanna hug our young mamas. I don't know how you
Yeah.
feel, but first I
Oh,
wanna
yeah.
grab them. I wanna hug them, and I wanna say, "Listen, 95% of what you're worrying about doesn't even matter. It doesn't
I
even
know.
matter, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say? Like, because what I sense on social media, and you're active on social media, is still that overwhelm, that overwhelm of how do I get it right from the get-go? When they're little, they're 3, 4, and 5. How do I do this? What would you tell them? What's something practical they need to be doing at that stage to start this journey of learning?
I think for kids between 0 and 7, what I would say to a mother is embrace wasting time.
Mm.
There is so much energy directed towards getting through and getting done. Even things like a trip to Target, where your whole goal is to like buy the thing, waste
Yes.
time, spend time, push the cart, let them be curious, notice where their attention is directed. When you're at home, make a part of your day where you do not have it bounded by a set time frame, like I have to be at the dentist or I've got to start dinner. Find time where you are on the floor, eye level with a child, wasting time. Let me just be clear here. You will be bored sometimes. Right?
Yes.
Children play the level of their play is not intellectually stimulating for someone in their 30s and 40s, but that does not mean it doesn't have value, and you are the instrument that helps them start building those really important internal connections, and by going slower, which feels
Mm.
so slow, you are actually helping them learn their own pace of learning instead of constantly competing with rush. So I would start with that. Get comfortable wasting time with your kids.
That might be my favorite answer, Julia. It's funny, I posted a reel just this morning, similar. I mean, it was just like, "So you don't like to play with your kids? Good, don't. You get in their way most of the time, just set it up and let them go at it." But I think that pause is where so much of that curiosity happens when they have the time to notice the butterfly, when they take the time to actually jump in the puddle and watch it splash and watch the prism occur, all those things. That is the foundation of learning, I feel like. But I know I get this question a lot as a, child development specialist. What about falling behind? Like it is I
Gosh.
think it's second to socialization. Like socialization
Yes.
might be the number one question the homeschoolers get, but the
Yes.
second is, well, how do you know your kid's not falling behind? How would you calm that mama?
It's the number one question too in my space. Falling
Yeah.
behind, am I doing enough? How do I
Yes.
know I'm doing enough? I would say you actually don't have an answer to that question ever for your entire journey. And let me just
Mm.
be clear, public school parents and private school parents are saying the same thing. They're
100%.
comparing schools to schools, kids within the classroom, grade level to grade level. This is just a parenting neuroses question, and it's because we want the best for our children. So the first place to start is just realizing it's normal. Of course, you
Yeah.
worry about that. You want to ensure that your child does not miss an opportunity because you weren't paying attention. So start with just a little self affirmation. Yep, I'm just doing the thing all parents do. And then within the homeschool space, the only way to know that your child is doing well is to know your child. I had a
Mm.
friend who said to me years ago, anytime I start worrying about one of my kids, I get them alone and I talk to them for an hour and then I feel okay again.
Wow.
Because once you're with your child, you're aware of all the things
Yes.
they're learning, and you're also aware of things that maybe need some help or some support because they'll tell you. But if we're just comparing them to like some kind of model student that lives in the fantasy mind of all people against your very real child, you will never actually feel comfortable. That is will continue to dog you into adulthood. And I'm at the age where people have adult kids and they're still like, why hasn't she bought a house yet? Why isn't
Right.
he trying to get a better job? Like that is just parenting. So make
Yeah.
peace with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think just tagging on to that, I would even add, not only talk to your kid, but in those young years, observe. Like,
Oh,
it is
yes,
okay to just sit back and watch them. You will learn so much by watching their play,
totally.
watching their interactions. You can find out their vocabulary. You can watch them doing math. You can watch them problem solve. You can watch and learn so much by simply being intentional with the observation. And often we think, okay, they're fine playing And Kathy said, stay out of the way and let them play, which is true. But at the same time, there's so much value in that intentional observation. You can gain so much knowledge about your kid. So,
Also, I love that. Observation is so important. So is conversation. We tend to
yes.
think a lot of learning happens on sheets of paper. That's training from school. But because you're at home with your kids, just chatting with them.
Mm.
Yesterday, I went to the homeschool outdoor co-op that my grandchildren are in, and I went to hang out with them for the day. It was pouring rain. It's a gorgeous forest. They were in their galoshes and their rain slickers. And so we went for a walk. It was the most magical thing. And we're just
I
out in the
bet.
rain, walking through the forest. And at one point, I said something like, you're wearing galoshes. I brought up the word galoshes. And my 3-year-old grandson said, they're rain boots. I said, did you know that rain boots and galoshes are the same thing? And he's like, they are? And then I said, yeah. And you know what we call that? We call that a synonym. And my 5-year-old granddaughter says, I know what cinnamon is. And I said, oh my gosh, I love that you just said that. I said, these are two different words. And cinnamon is like a spice that you put in food, and a synonym are two words that mean the same thing. And so we just started making up words that mean the same thing. This is what I mean. If you have an academic thing that you care about that you aren't sure your child has, be conversational. Are my 5 and 3-year-old going to remember synonym? No, because they're 3 and 5. But guess what? By the time they're ready to start remembering it, they will have heard it from me. It will
That's
not
right.
be their first encounter. And I'm not saying to do this in sort of that, like, I'm going to make their brain smarter, younger kind of idea.
Right.
That's not, the little genius idea. That's not the goal. It's to create a context where conversation about things that are part of learning and academics are natural, are part of your daily interaction.
It's so true. And what research shows us is those interactions are remembered so much more
Totally.
than the piece of paper. If you were to
Exactly.
wait and present that on a piece of paper on an iPad, they definitely don't have a chance of remembering it, but they're going to remember it so much faster when you put it in context in a conversation.
Yes.
And that conversation doesn't change. Listen, I know we usually just talk about young kids, but I think it's one of the sweetest parts of parenting. I used to remember I would get so sad when my kids would get their driver's license, only because that meant our car conversations were over. And those were the sweetest times when I would, and we lived in Atlanta. So, I mean, every car ride was an hour. So I got some great conversations with my
True.
kids, and I would be so sad once they got their license. I mean, happy that I wasn't having to drive them, but sad that those conversation times were over. Anything else about this book? I mean, I know you've written other books and I want to talk about those too, but Julie, I have to tell you, I think it's a treasure. Just
Thank you.
from a child development mama, from a mama who homeschooled for 30 years, I
Wow.
think every person who considers homeschooling should grab this book. So I can't wait to shout it as we promote this podcast. Thank you.
I think one of the things that I sort of dealt with when I was raising children in the 90s and early 2000s was there was this belief that we could raise kids who would really turn out, according to our own goals,
Oh,
right? We have
yes.
this vision, and homeschooling sort of fed into it. It was like,
Yeah.
we're going
There's
to
a
do it
formula.
better than the schools, right? And when you have kind of an ideology that guides your homeschooling, it kind of sets you up for failure and not getting to know your child. So, part of what I tried to do in this book is not just address learning, but also the psychology of the mother, like
Mhm.
what it feels like to be under those pressures. How neat does your house need to be? How important is the schedule and routine? What are those signposts of warning, warning? Like right now, we have a little bit of a moral panic around cell phones and the internet, right? And so
Yes.
we're just adding a new layer of regulatory purpose to parenting that is driving a wedge between parents and children. These are the kinds of things I'm kind of warning about inside the Brave Learner, not just the educational structure. And the reason is, and I know you know this because you're all about skillful play. Relationship is at the foundation of self regulation, not
100%.
control. Not control. So, our objective in those early years, 0 to 7, is to build trust. And trust comes from what you said, observation, what I said, conversation, and
Mhm.
time spent together.
Yes.
Where I used to say this all the time when I spoke, and you're reminding me of it now. And I think it's time for me to bring it back out. Your number one job for your children is to give them a happy life. It's not to make them better people.
Right.
That's not in your power, that's in their power, but you can create conditions for them to smile. And so
Mhm.
if you're in a long stretch where everybody's stressed and tense, nobody's learning anything except how to manage stress and tension. If you want them to relax into learning, think about today. What would put a smile on that child's face? Is it eye contact? Is it a snack? Is it dress up clothes and face paints? Is it going to the zoo? Think in terms of well being more than education, and you'll get there.
Okay, I might start crying because I love that so much. And I couldn't agree with you more because and, again, we're on the other side. We have adult
Yes.
children, and I am sure just because I read about your traveling kids and all the things that you've given them, and man, my kids still wanna come home. Like, my
Oh,
daughter's
yeah.
like, "I have fall break, and I just wanna come see you, mom. I just wanna
Oh,
come see you." And, you know,
I love that.
I know, it just there's nothing greater to me, but that didn't just happen when our kids get 21 and 25.
No.
That happened because we showed up at 3 and 4 and 5, and we were present in those early years, and we focused on the relationship more than the obedience, and we
Oh,
focused on the choices, like, seeing our kids as whole beings, seeing our kids of worthy of respect, that we are not
yes.
some we don't dominate, and we it makes me teary, honestly. It makes me
Yes.
teary to think about the moms that are so stressed out because their kids aren't obeying the first time, and I wanna go,
Oh,
"But they're not meant to obey the first time." They are their brains can't even handle that. Their prefrontal cortex is, can't even get there because their lower brain is freaking out, and
well,
dysregulated, and you're
and can we
freaking out and dysregulated.
well, I was just gonna say, and can we just add, you're in your 30s usually.
Right,
Like, you don't
right.
know anything yet.
I
The
know.
30s are
But
a
we think
really
we do
well,
because
this is
I
what I was gonna
did.
say. The 30s are a tricky decade. Let me explain them this way.
Yeah.
They're the decade where you have decided you will do it differently and better than your parents. And
Yes.
so that guides a lot of our action. But I'm
Yep.
here to tell you on this side of it that you're just making your own conditions that someday will be evaluated by your older kids. So
Correct.
if you can stay soft in your 30s and 40s, if you can
Hmm.
recognize the feedback from your kids, not as disobedience or laziness or willful defiance, if you
Yes.
can recognize it as children figuring out the world, you will get a lot further. I
Yeah.
tell a story in The Brave Learner that I love to tell because my mother was a genius at this stuff. And I remember my 4-year-old son was trying to pour milk on the table. And by then I was pregnant. Or no, I guess I had a 2-year-old. So my youngest would have been 2. He was 4. I had 3 older kids. The house was bedlam. He's getting ready to pour milk. I know it's going to go all over the table, right?
As it
So
does.
as it does. So I am running to the table and ramping up to shut it down. And right as I'm about to deliver this, like, be careful, don't spill the milk, my mother sees me and says, look at him, only 4 years on the planet. He wants to pour the milk. And everything in me relaxed. I was like, I could just help him pour the milk. I don't have
Yeah.
to turn this into a tirade of being careful. And
Yeah.
the idea that 4 years on the planet sounded so short to her because she was in her 60s, right?
Right.
Like these are the things that, you know, every now and then when you want to like wind up on your child, pretend it's your grandchild, maybe just like channel that energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I talk about too when I'm out traveling the circuit is lightheartedness.
Oh,
Lightheartedness
beautiful.
is such a superpower. If you can just turn that when you're about to just what you
Yeah.
described, go at it. And then you could just take a quick pause and I mean, really giggle because what does it flipping matter? And I don't know if you know the part of my story that I lost a son a few years ago to
Wow.
leukemia.
My.
And boy, if I didn't rant about that before, and I did, now when that son is not here, I want to scream it at these mamas. You ask yourself why not instead of why. When you want to say no, you better say yes so fast for that little one to experience pouring the milk, spilling the milk. And guess what? You just clean it up.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing to watch independence. Like infants and toddlers, Julie, are actually my favorite. I love a toddler.
Oh, gosh.
And it's funny, I just did a podcast on toddlers and talking about that. I love it when they say no in mine, which, aggravates everybody. But for me to
Oh,
watch that joy of independence, them becoming human, them becoming
yes.
finally, I'm so ticked at you for doing everything for me, mom. I can do it myself. And that's the beginning. If we could
Yes.
celebrate it with lightheartedness, we could. I think we
So
could change
great.
so much going forward. So I love that. What about your book, Critical Thinker? Now, critical thinking, I think, is something that I love as well. I have not read that book, I will have to confess.
Okay,
So I'm going to rely on you to teach us and why we need this book. But I do love the idea of critical thinking and do believe it starts at an early age.
it
So I
does.
want you to talk about it. Like, how do you start that if you've got a 4 or 5 year old and you want to
Yes.
build that foundation and empower them to start being a critical thinker? Where would you start?
Okay, so first of all, you've even already identified it. It starts by recognizing that a child has autonomy and
Yes.
that their thoughts are their own. Our job is not to create carbon copies of ourselves. We are not the best version of being a human.
I'm
We're
not
just
for sure.
we're not. We're a good version. We're a
Yeah.
good version.
Yeah.
We do a nice job, we're devoted. We love our families. We want to do a good job. And just as a sort of a comment of compassion, because we want that, I have absolute faith in parents to do a great job with their
Yes.
kids. Like, they don't
Yes.
need more training as much as they need to keep tuning in to that
Mm.
child. So,
Yes.
what we do in my book, Raising Critical Thinkers, what I discovered when I was writing the book, the working title, the original title was Raising Self Aware Thinkers.
Mm.
And my publisher said, I don't think that that will grab the attention of the audience. And what you're really describing is critical thinking. But let me tell you why that was the original title. Because to me, critical thinking starts with self awareness. It's not the ability to just dress down the other guy who got it wrong, it's the ability to identify your own perspective,
Mm.
bias, your loyalties, the communities that shape you, the limits to your understanding, the way that your culture has shaped your identity. Because until you can observe those, you cannot appreciate that those exist for someone else. And so a lot of our
Yes.
outrage is this belief that everyone had the same experiences as us and just drew the wrong conclusion.
Right.
Instead of recognizing there's an entire constellation of factors that shaped that person's perspective, and that person's perspective is every bit, let me see if I can say it right, is as every bit logical as
Mm.
yours
Yeah.
inside their body.
Right.
And literally, when we're raising children, I felt like I had to teach first parents how to know that about themselves so they could grant that same level of integrity to a child. So when a child says something like, I don't want to wash my hands, what the old school parent used to say was, well, you have to. I told you to. It's disobedience. I'll spank you if you don't. All these versions
Sure.
of authority is the reason. Today's modern parent does a manipulative version of authority, is what I call it. And here's what
Interesting.
it is.
Okay.
They come along and they give a reason for why the child should wash their hands, but the reason is theirs.
Yeah.
So they come in and they say, well, there are germs, there are these invisible germs that live on your hands. And if you eat without washing your hands, you're going to get sick. So now what they've done is they've doubled down on the authority. The old school parent just says, do what I say. The
Right.
new school parent says, do what I say because my reasoning is correct, which
Right.
is two layers of authority. The child has never investigated germs, and so they have to trust an unnamed scientist and their parent. That's two layers.
Right.
Here's what you can do instead with the 2, 3, 4, 5 year old who says, I don't want to wash my hands. Get curious, find out the logic story that operates in their mind. So the first question is, oh, wow, you used to wash your hands. What changed? Or you don't want to wash your hands? Tell me more about that. You don't have to say
Absolutely.
why, just tell me more about that.
Mm.
And you might find out that they just don't like the feeling of water.
Mhm.
So they may say, the water's too wet, or the water's too cold, or I don't like the water. Now it's your opportunity to problem solve for the problem. It's not about germs, it's about the water. So, can we get rid of germs by just using a blow dryer and no water? Can we test the temperature of the water until it's the right temperature and then always find that temperature, maybe with a thermometer? Can we use hand gel instead of water if that's more acceptable? By doing this, you're actually helping your child to think, what am I actually feeling and thinking? And
Yes.
how do I address this problem? Because here's the other thing. When you make a statement like, well, you have invisible germs on your hands, and if you eat and it goes in, you'll get sick, they have evidence to show that that isn't true. They just ate dirt in the backyard and they're not sick. They've been
Absolutely.
they've been to Target with you, and when the baby spit out the pacifier and it landed on the floor, you literally licked the germs off with your own mouth and put it back in your
Now
baby's
that's
mouth.
only if that was the second baby. The first
That's
baby, you
right.
wouldn't have done
First
that,
baby, you
but
would not do that. Second
second
baby, you would.
beyond.
But that's what I'm
Yes.
saying. Like, we sometimes are just passing on propaganda from our own backgrounds that are
Absolutely.
more about culture and habit than they are about science. So, critical thinking starts with curiosity, actually tracing the logic story behind the statement. We can even do this, just sidebar, with parents. When we don't agree politically or about some point of view, one of the questions I always recommend you ask, you can do this with your teenagers, you can do this with a sibling, anyone, is they're saying a statement that you find really reprehensible. You can say this: tell me the beautiful vision that that perspective you hold is going to achieve in our community.
Oh,
Because the
wow.
moment you ask that question, they are put in their best non defensive vocabulary and they're excited to enlighten you with why that view is a good view. Now, you may not agree with it still, but now you have a new insight into the person.
Yes. Yes.
And you can always follow up with this question: wow, I didn't think of it that way. How do you account for and fill in the blank of the thing you think is important to you that they didn't account for? Now you're giving them an opportunity to even kind of hear where you're coming from, but they get to tell you how they've thought about it within their perspective. Critical thinking is foundational to these kinds of dynamics. It is not about being right or wrong. It is about growing in our understanding of why people think the way they do. So there can be increased conversation and transfer of information between people. When we stay locked in debate, it's just a zero sum game. You're all right, I'm all wrong, or vice versa.
Right, right. I think that's so powerful. And again, I go back to these little guys and why it is so important that we let them have disagreements. We let them have struggles in relationships. We let them play and interact, by themselves so that they can get to those problem solving situations. Because I think they do start at an early age. We help them be comfortable with saying, I didn't like it when you took my toy, or whatever the situation is, but to help them navigate those conversations from the get go. And I think often we skip that opportunity as parents. We just take it away, move on because that's easier for us. And I feel like we're missing the foundation of your critical thinking that's so
No, I
desperately needed.
that's 100% right, because what we want our kids to be able to do is to see more points of view than
Yes.
just one right view. When you are the parent who has the one right view, I call this the parental propaganda program. You're
Zippy
basically
dee.
saying, I know all the answers. I am
Yeah.
always right, and unless you align with me, you are not safe. And so that trains a child to look for an authority to tell them what's true. If we think in a critical thinking way, even with a young child, 2, 3, and 4, when they make a decision to throw the toy at a baby brother, this is a moment to try and understand the logic story that informed that. Now, they're not articulate, right? At 3
Right.
years old, they don't know
Right.
their interiors, but you can ask questions like, does your body feel tight? I
Yes.
notice your face is tense. What happened right before you threw the toy? Help narrate and name the experience. And I watch, my kids, and sure yours too, they're being raised in a very different generational dynamic around parenting. And some of
Yes.
it's quite beautiful, actually saying, I can tell you really didn't want your sister to come into the room when you were
Yes.
playing by yourself. I understand that feeling. That helps them know that they're being seen and heard. Same with video games. If you've got a kid who's really into the iPad, sit and play with them before they disengage. See what they've really accomplished in that little game, validate it,
Yes.
support it,
Yes.
and then disengage instead of it being like, okay, I tolerated your 10 minutes, now get off, right?
Absolutely.
It's supporting that person underneath the behavior.
Yeah. And I think it's, back to what I think is being labeled incorrectly as gentle parenting. I mean, I
Oh,
I think it's developmental parenting. I
love
think
it.
it's respectful parenting. I'm a fan of all of that. That's how I parented my children.
Same.
I was definitely on the outs, in some of the growing kids God's way groups because I didn't do that. But I think it's getting a bad name. I think general parenting is a terrible name, personally, because I think it really doesn't explain what it is. It's beautiful if it's done correctly. It's
Mm,
beautiful when we recognize that these children do get to express themselves, because back to what you were describing earlier with these children who just obey and who just follow the rules and who just do what the parent tells them, and I'm sure you've seen it, those kids are now adults,
ugh.
and many of them have walked away from their families.
Oh my gosh. I'm amazed
Many.
that you brought that up because it is so rampant right now,
It is.
this idea of estrangement.
Mhm.
And I think what one of the main messages being communicated by this body of millennials is you had too much control over me. And now on social media, you have too much sight, too many
Right.
eyes on me. I need some space to figure out who I am without the constant input of this personality that was so big in my life. A lot
Correct.
of people are taking it as punishment, but really, I think in some ways, because everything we do is so visible, this generation did not have an opportunity to just like go away and be an adult and then
Right.
come back. They're
Right.
sort of like, I got to create that for myself because
Yeah.
it didn't happen naturally. And for people like you or me whose kids have stayed in touch with us, it's also because I'm not that hands on of a parent, especially after they were adults. I
Yeah.
remember my daughter, she went to France as an exchange student in college, and she had to land in Amsterdam, visit a friend, then take a train, then take a bus, and then find her apartment by herself. And back then, we didn't have internet cell phones yet, so she had no way to contact us. And so my husband and I, we sent her off. And like 4 or 5 days later, we finally heard from her. And she said she was the only one on her program who went 5 days without talking to a parent while she was getting established in France.
Wow.
And she actually said to us, "Did you guys not care?" And I was like, "No, I just figured you're grown up, you're gonna figure it out.
You're
We'll
doing it.
hear from you. If you're
Yeah.
dead, we'll definitely hear from you. Like, I lived abroad, your dad lived abroad. Like, isn't this how it's supposed to be?" So we were kind of trusting of our kids. And I think at a
Yes.
very young age, when my son was, I think 9 or 10, we had a rock climbing gym that was about 2 miles from our house, and we taught him how to ride his bike there. He had to go over train tracks and cross
Wow.
with a traffic light to get there. This is before words like free range parenting
Yeah.
existed. We only had one car. So I was like, well, he shouldn't not get to go to the rock
Yes.
climbing gym. Just this is before cell phones. I feel like we've sort of lost confidence in
Mm,
how smart children are. They want to come home. They're
they
not gonna
do.
leave your house and never come home,
Right.
and they want responsibility,
Well,
right?
that's what
Like,
I was gonna say. What it sounds like, you embrace risk. You let your
yes,
children take these risks, and those
yes,
risks pay off because that
yes,
builds confidence, that builds resilience. That's what I think often is missing too. Our kids were so contained, or a lot of
yeah,
parents keep their kids so
yes,
contained that they don't get that chance to build that confidence and build that resilience. And so the end result is often well, it's a lot of things, but
well, and
what we're seeing is that sometimes it means they're cutting off their families and they're saying, I need to figure this out now. I didn't get
that's
a
it,
chance to do that earlier. And so I'm doing
right.
it and I'm doing it alone. And I
It's
think there's
very
going to,
painful to
it is,
watch,
it is very painful to
especially when
watch.
it's your friends and your friends' kids that you knew when they were young,
Right.
right? And you knew that the intention was so pure on the part of the
Correct.
parents. And so, one of the tools that I often recommend, and you can do this with a 3 and a 4-year-old, and I highly recommend it, is to develop a habit of owning when you trespass your child's sort of autonomy. Right?
Mm,
So if you have, let's say you really do have to get to the doctor and you've got to disrupt your child who was playing happily and that
yes,
child doesn't want to go, that's partly your bad planning. You didn't give them the
that's
10
right.
minute and then the 5 minute warning, right? But you still have to go. And it was your bad planning. Instead of losing your cool at the child for not hopping with it, own it. I used to say it's okay to yell as long as you're yelling about yourself and not about your kids. You can say
Preach.
something
Yes.
along the lines of, "Oh my gosh, I was so disorganized
Yeah.
today. We have to get to the doctor. And now I'm going to hurt your feelings by taking you off that iPad. And I just need you to do it. And we'll solve it later. I'll give you a treat. But oh my gosh, I messed up." that kind of yelling is so shocking to children because they're like, "Oh, wait, is
Wait, yeah.
I didn't do anything wrong." That is so different. Another good example, all the shoes are down the hall and nobody put them away and you're just stressed out. Instead of saying, "These shoes are driving me crazy. Get them out of the hall." You can say things like, "I am not doing well. The shoes are in the hall and I want to have fun with you and I'm kind of losing my mind. So either you can help me clean them up or I'm going to have to, and then we can play the game." By doing that, you're owning the actual experience you're having instead of foisting it on your kids.
And what a beautiful way to model that. I
Yes.
mean, again, I think you said it yourself of how homeschooling so much is caught and not taught. And I think that is part of it. I mean, that's what that looks like. That
Yes.
looks like you modeling those moments of what to do. And I think all of us have empathy when someone owns their junk, whatever it is. We all
Us.
can have empathy for that.
Well, I was going to say, especially children.
Yes, they do.
They are the most generous forgivers on the planet because all they want is connection with you.
Yes.
I remember one time we were like at the table and I was trying to do homeschool, whatever that was that morning.
Yes.
And everybody was squirrely. They kept poking each other and giggling and they weren't listening. And I just got up and I walked into the kitchen table was here. I just walked to the family room where I could still see everybody and I just sat on the floor and the dog came over and I started petting the dog. I said nothing. And
Mm,
after a few moments of their silliness, they're like looking around, where's mom? And then all of a sudden, they just kind of all ended up on the floor
yes.
next to me because they wanted to be with me. I could have turned it into like, "You're not listening." And instead, I just went and got some peace back for myself. And then they joined me and we started from the floor. And I think sometimes
Ugh,
that's the way to approach these moments. Don't try to take
it's so
control, let go of
yes.
control, right?
Let go of control and the focus on connection. I mean,
Yes.
I can't say that enough that kids long for it. They're
Oh,
almost desperate for it. We live on a lake in Alabama and we have a little restaurant that we go to that has a lovely little sand area where the kids can play while the parents are eating. Well, some of my friends' grandkids are there and I've kind of adopted them. So I went and sat and was talking to these 2 kids. And before long, there were 20 children around me. And
oh,
I'm not exaggerating, 20 children. And they're digging in the sand and we're having conversation. We're making ice creams. And it was a example of that, the longing. They're like, oh, wait, there's an adult over here that's connecting with a little kid. My parents are over there eating, but you're going to talk to me. And they just kept coming and coming and coming. And it was just such a vivid reminder of that longing for connection. And I think that if we miss that in our homeschooling journey, we will have missed the most important part, far exceeding any academic success. We have got to get the connection piece right. And I love that everything you're talking about points to that. It points to
100%.
that connection. And I love that. Before we run out of time, I want to at least get to your newest book because
Oh,
listen, writing with little kids is just one of my favorite things, Julie. So I have to get to that. Help My Kid Hates Writing. Tell me why you wrote that book. Tell me what they're going to gain from this book. And then let's talk about little ones.
oh my gosh. Okay. So, Help My Kid Hates Writing is the culmination of over 30 years of interacting with parents who have kids who struggle with writing. Now, this book will work even if your kids like writing, by the way, because all the tools are the same. But what I discovered is I worked in the professional writing space as a ghostwriter, a magazine editor. I edited dissertations for PhD students. And one of the things I discovered very early on is that the way professionals approach the instruction of writing and the way educators approach it is completely different.
Mm.
So if you are a professional writer working in the professional space, we don't have grades. We're there to help a writer express what they actually want to say effectively for the sake of a reader. In
Mhm.
the academic space, we have teachers instructing writing using rubrics and criteria for a grade. There are no readers. The teacher doesn't even behave like a reader. She's just or he's just reading it for the sake
The
of giving
rubric.
it a
Oh,
grade. And so what
great.
happens is children very quickly disconnect from their original writing voices because they're trying to guess the ideal text that lives in the imagination of the adult in charge. That is not the same as writing for someone who you hope to delight or shock or persuade or inform. So, what we did in Brave Writer when I started my company and the reason it became popular, I was just teaching, well, I was basically just sharing online on these homeschool discussion boards in the late 1990s, and everyone was acting like I was giving brand new information about writing.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, my mother, just as a side note, she's written 77 books. She
Oh my
was, yeah,
goodness.
I grew up around publishing. So
Okay.
I understood writing through a completely different frame of reference, through
Mhm.
freedom, through self expression, through opportunities to revise endlessly. So, in Help My Kid Hates Writing, I like to start by explaining that we need to return children to a sense that their voices have value. And
Yes.
we do this before they're even 5. So this is perfect for your podcast because
Love
here's
it.
what the move. The move is not teach them to read and handwrite and spell so that now they can write. Writing is expression transcribed. Anyone can be the transcriptionist. It doesn't have to be the writer. In fact, if I, God forbid, chopped off your hands, gouged out your eyes, you could still be a writer, right? I
Yes.
know, very
Yeah.
gruesome. But
Yes.
I say that to make a point. The writing comes from the living source inside of you, not from your ability to handwrite, type, or spell.
Mm.
So when your child is little, what I want you to do is catch them in the act of self expression and jot it down. Here's what that looks like. Let's say you've got, little 5-year-old Seth. He's outside playing in the backyard. Suddenly, his dog Rocky is chasing a squirrel. He's completely entertained by it. He comes speeding back into the kitchen. You're making dinner. Suddenly, he's like, Mom, Rocky was chasing a squirrel in the backyard. When you hear that kind of passion, I want you to pick up a pen, scratch sheet of paper, back of a bank envelope, whatever's handy, and simply start writing his exact words. Now, that child will often say to you something like, Mom, what are you doing? Here's exactly what you say back. This is the script. You say, this is so good. I don't want to forget it, so I'm writing it down. Let
Oh,
that child see their words that they're saying that are natural to them become recorded on paper. That night at dinner, I want you to pull out that little sheet of paper and say, Seth was telling me this great story about Rocky in the backyard. I was afraid I would forget it, so I wrote it down. I want to read it to everybody. Read it aloud to the family. You will watch Seth beam with pride because that is the feeling you have when you are read for pleasure.
girl, you obviously have not read my curriculum, but that exact thing is all through it. Literally, it is every single month we make a book. Every single month we say words are powerful and that what you just said, the delight when you watch a child. I did a YouTube video with my granddaughter. We made a book together. And because I wanted to show, moms how to do it. Like now, I did not you're even better because I didn't grab the natural. It was a, "Oh my gosh, we went to the zoo. Tell me about it. What was the first thing you saw?" So I led them a little bit, but it was still that delight of reading it back, of words have power. You're an author at the age of 3,
Exactly.
and
It's that. And
it
there's
is
nothing
that.
wrong with guiding it. But what I will say is this practice of catching them in the act
Yes, I love that.
is powerful because a lot of times when we say, let's write something, they go through this awkward translation thing where they
Yes,
have to think of words that they think you want them to say.
right.
So if you catch them in natural speech, especially blocked writers at 10, 11, and 12, but start it young, now you are showing them that when you say, I want you to write, they know that you mean what's inside them, not what's
Yes.
inside your imagination. And here's what you can do with that sheet of paper. And I mean, it can be the back of an envelope. I'm not kidding. Toss it in the library basket and read it again
Absolutely.
and read it again. And pretty soon, your kids are going to bring you paper.
They
I
will.
remember coming home one night from being out with my husband, and my daughter Johanna, who was 12 at the time, came running to the door with a clipboard. And she said, Katrin, my youngest daughter, who was 7 years younger, so 5 years old, wrote her first story. And of course, my brain was like, how is she writing? She's 5. And she said, no, I was putting her to bed. And she started telling me her own version of Cinderella. So I wrote it down. And I thought, oh my gosh, our family gets it.
Yes.
And here it
Yes.
was, her trying to keep up with a 5-year-old's pace. The lines were sloping, the spelling was terrible, there was no punctuation. And yet here we had like the raw story of a 5-year-old written down by her older sister. This is what can take hold in your family when you value self-expression
It's
as
so
the
true. I
goal.
will say I'm grateful that this is our story as well, the same,
I
and
love
my
it.
kids have all thanked me. They're like, "Mom, I didn't know that I should be struggling with creative writing. I didn't understand that people," she goes, They're all like, "I'm the best writer I know." And listen, I'm a terrible writer. Let's be honest. As far as, all the technical stuff, I'm a terrible technical writer. I need to correct myself. I'm not great at the technical stuff. And so I wasn't great at teaching the technical stuff, but they didn't care. They're like, "Mom, we could learn the technical stuff. You really taught us to express ourselves." And I see it. I see the way they write my birthday cards and my birthday text crush me that they can express their true, like the details and the depth of their thankfulness for me as a mom blows
No,
my mind. But it's because, again, when they were 3, their words mattered. And when they were 4, their words were honored. And when they were 5, their words were read back over and over. Just what you're saying, Julie. It is,
Kathy, that's such a gift you gave them. And I will take it a step further. Keeping a record, whether you write it for them or they will eventually write for themselves. We have a free writing practice that teaches them how to do that. It's better than photographs
oh,
for preserving the
yes.
memory of your child. When I've gotten rid of none of their writing. And when I go back and read what they wrote at 5, and then at 10, and then at 15, and then at 25, you see the development of a mind
Yes.
life over time, the precision with vocabulary, the creative exploration, the fearlessness to write what they think because they think what they have to say matters. This is
I
better than
love it.
photographs. Haircuts change, their cute little faces change, but the mind life, it's like a photograph of the mind. And
Ugh.
so I urge parents to stop thinking so exclusively about essays. The academic essay format lasts 8 years in a person's life. That's 10% of an 80-year life. The
Wow.
rest of the time, they are writing Reddit posts, they're writing captions for TikTok, they're expressing themselves in these long form text message, WhatsApp chat groups.
Yes.
Your kids are using writing. I always like to say this, more kids today are writing for publication than in the history of the world because of the internet.
Wow.
When people say kids hate writing, I'm like, no, they hate writing for school. Because the
Yes.
second the internet threw open its doors, you know what happened? Kids got Tumblrs, MySpace, live journals, Facebook accounts, TikToks,
True.
YouTube channels. All they want to do is write. They don't even want to talk on the phone. They love
Oh,
writing.
they
They
do.
love writing. So, how do we make that bridge from self expression into academic formats? We have to first help them value their thought lives in writing. And Help My Kid Hates Writing takes them on the entire journey, helps them go from not writing at all to understanding how to do revision. When we do revision in this book, we just start with playfully changing stuff. So they get comfortable making changes. Instead of improving the
Yes.
piece, we just change it. So things like turn everything you wrote into a lie, roll a dice, and whatever number you get, change 3 words.
Oh, love
Another
that,
roll a
Julie.
dice, another number you get, add 3 ideas. Help yourself get in the spirit of play around writing instead of this zero sum, high stakes, I might not get an A kind of thinking.
And what age group? Like, when should a parent buy that book?
Now,
Okay, yesterday.
yeah, it's 0 to 18.
Okay.
That's what's incredible. I take you on the entire
I
journey.
love it.
The way we give feedback is called reader response feedback. It's completely different than school teacher corrections, and you
Yes.
can start doing that already. Even if your kids are in school, you can do it. Yeah.
Oh, that is fascinating. Now, where can they find all of that? All your books? Where can they find you? All the things.
So, my company, Brave Writers, sells homeschooling curricula and online classes. So, go to bravewriter.com. My author website is juliebogartwriter.com, and my books are there, but they're also everywhere. You'll find them in Barnes and Noble and indie book publishing and Amazon and all of it. And then I'm on Instagram as Julie Brave Writer. And I have a Substack called Brave Learning with Julie Bogart, which I think would really match what you're talking about in this podcast.
I love that. Lastly, I always ask my guests their favorite childhood memory. Can you think of one from your own childhood?
I totally can. And it's with my grandparents. Is that okay?
I love it. It's whatever it
Okay.
is.
Yeah. So one time I was staying with my grandparents for 2 weeks in a summer, and my grandfather bought me this sort of holly hobby craft. It required using a razor blade and cutting out these layers of holly hobby and stacking them up and making this cute little picture. And 2 nights before I was going home to California, they were in Chicago. I started crying myself to sleep because I knew I would never do it. And I felt guilty that they had bought me this project. And my grandmother heard me crying and she came into my room. It was 11 p.m. and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "You need to take this back. I don't feel capable of it. I know I'll never do it. I feel guilty for buying it. She goes, hold on. She called my grandfather in. She had me retell him everything. They exchanged glances and they said, get up. I said, get up. And they said, we're going to do it right now. And we went down to the kitchen at 11 p.m. My grandmother made cookies, and my grandfather sat there puzzling out with me how to build up these little layers of holly hobby with matchsticks and glue and a razor blade. And it is my most treasured memory because I was taken so seriously that
Yes.
they gave up sleep and they wanted me to go home with this win. And I just think,
Julie, that
what an
is
incredible story, right?
yeah, that's remarkable. Thank you for sharing that with us.
What a great
I have
question.
loved chatting with you. You have taught me some things. I love that at our age we can still learn
Oh,
and we can
totally.
still grow. And I'm so excited for everyone to listen to all of your amazing words and wisdom and encouragement. Thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, I wanna send everybody to you.
Well, great. Do that too.
I will
Thanks.
definitely do that. That was just delightful. I love your
Thanks.
work.
Thanks so much, Julie.